NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, presents Aeronautics and Space Report.
Mars has for centuries challenged the imagination of scientists everywhere. Only in recent years has the faraway planet begun giving up a few of its well-kept secrets with the help of highly detailed photographs taken by the Mariner spacecraft. In 1976, the United States will land two unmanned spacecraft on the Martian surface. Called Vikings, the pair of landers will sample the atmosphere on the way down and then photograph and chemically analyze the surface. Experiments on board will also test for the presence or absence of life there. By comparing Mars with Earth, we should be able to understand better the origin and problems of our own planet. In New Mexico, some key tests were recently completed. Tested was the parachute landing system, which will carry the Vikings to a soft landing. After being lifted to an altitude of 120,000 feet, the spacecraft separated. Rocket motors ignited, boosting the vehicle to supersonic speed. At this point, the parachute was deployed. A protective shield blown away. And the chute lowered the simulated test spacecraft onto the desert. Successful testing of Viking, this country's first Martian lander.
This has been an Aeronautics and Space Report presented by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
I think the discovery of life on Mars, no matter how humble, the simplest microorganism will imply a profound revolution in the science of biology. I think the discovery of life on Mars will permit many people to make the grand leap to the assumption of a galaxy filled with life.
Viking, a mission to soft land two 1,200-pound spacecraft like this on the surface of Mars and search for life there.
This is Launch Complex 41, from where the Viking missions will be launched on the Titan Centaur launch vehicle. On August 11th, the first mission will be launched, and 10 days later, the second will be launched from this same pad. The lander and orbiter were shipped from the factory down here to KSC in February of this year. They have been undergoing a series of tests to prepare both vehicles for the flight to Mars.
Launched separately on August 11th and 21st, the Vikings spend nearly a year traveling to Mars, with the first arriving in mid-June 1976 in preparation for a July 4th landing. Once at Mars, the spacecraft are placed into orbit around the planet. The orbiter's onboard cameras begin methodically photographing potential landing sites to make sure they are safe. The lander is then commanded to separate from the orbiter and starts its 6-hour descent through the Martian atmosphere. A parachute pops out about 20,000 feet above the surface. Finally, 3 terminal descent engines fire at 4,000 feet from touchdown, serving as brakes for the plunging spacecraft. The lander now slowly descends and softly lands. Its camera views the surrounding landscape.
The place we want to land is in the northern hemisphere. Now, I'm going to tell you about the reasons for this. The first site is here. It's called Chryse. It's a low, broad, flat valley flowing from the floor of a giant chasm, the Caprades Chasm, that flows deep and low. It combines the combination of biological interest, geological interest, the youthful stuff that must have flown from this chasm system into this very low area. The second site is more northerly. Now, that site was selected primarily because of our interest in water. Cydonia represents one area at a high latitude where there is the possibility that sometime during the year, for some small period, that there could be transient liquid water. And for the biological reasons, that liquid water is absolutely paramount.
One of the most interesting science experiments is the sampling device. A small shovel on the end of a telescoping arm will reach out, scoop up some Martian soil, then drop it into a chemical analyzer on the Viking landing craft. If there are Mars quakes, they will be transmitted through Viking's legs to an onboard seismometer. Throughout the mission, the orbiters continue photographing and thermally mapping the surface. They serve also as relay stations for data from the landers. Vikings to Mars. Through the search for life on other planets, we may better understand the basic processes controlling our own. It's waiting out there, just as it always has. Reluctant to give up its secrets, even to earlier spacecraft flying by its sometimes dust-shrouded surface. What's it really like? Was there ever water flowing through those winding channels? Is there life on the mysterious red planet? Mars. In a few short months, as two unmanned Viking spacecraft soft land on the Martian surface, we may begin finding some of the answers to these and other tantalizing questions that both scientists and philosophers have been asking for hundreds of years.
Reason.
Dr. Carl Sagan is one of the team of Viking science experimenters.
I think the one thing which is very likely is that if Mars does have life, it will be a life very different from the sort we have here. See, all the life on the Earth is the same kind of life. I mean, on the outside, we think we are pretty different. The oak trees and the petunias and the bears and the people, we have the sense are different kinds of organisms, but we're not. On the inside, we're all the same. We use the same kinds of biochemical molecules. And what we don't know is whether those are the only kinds of molecules that can make biology go, or whether there's a vast variety of possible biologies, of which ours is only a single case. And since you don't have enough time to let life evolve in the laboratory, the only way to test such a question is to go somewhere else and see what natural experiments nature has done for us on the surface of another planet. That's, to my mind, one of the most exciting aspects of the exploration of Mars, the opportunity to find out what other kinds of life are possible.
Command system on all stations covering spacecrafts 36, 37.
Copy that.
This is Viking Control, a windowless building at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, focal point for one of the most ambitious scientific efforts ever undertaken. It is here that the well-being of the Mars-bound spacecraft is constantly monitored. It is also from here that the Viking landers will be commanded to separate from the orbiter half of the spacecraft, descend to the Martian surface, and commence the planned science experiments. Recently, all of these people spent 11 days rehearsing the first Viking landing. The simulations, as they are called, give flight controllers, engineers, and computer operators an opportunity to test out the complex ground control systems that are so vital to the successful landings and surface exploration. Right now, Viking 1 is about 111 million miles from Earth, 12.5 million miles from Mars, and is traveling at 59,000 miles per hour. Viking 2 is close behind.
Viking 1 will arrive at Mars and will be placed in orbit about Mars on June the 19th. The landing for the Viking 1 lander on the surface of Mars is currently scheduled for July the 4th. The second vehicle is trailing the first one somewhat, and we will put the second vehicle in orbit about Mars on August the 7th. And we plan to land the second vehicle on the surface of Mars on September the 4th.
Roger, we just switched to single subcarrier, full 14 and 43.
10-watt mode. Copy that.
Vikings to Mars. The stage is set, the spacecraft are well underway, and the people on the ground are nearly ready for this country's first Martian landing.
We have landed. Roger.
Mars has for centuries challenged the imagination of scientists everywhere. Only in recent years has the faraway planet begun giving up a few of its well-kept...
NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, presents Aeronautics and Space Report.
Vikings, the pair of landers will sample the atmosphere on the way down and then photograph and chemically analyze the surface. Experiments on board will also test for the presence or absence of life there. Secrets, with the help of highly detailed photographs taken by the Mariner spacecraft. In 1976, the United States will land 2 unmanned spacecraft on the Martian surface. Called